folks, let's start this. We're going to have a hearing on the proposed ordinances here. Does everybody have a copy of 2020 proposed ordinances? We have several here, not in the order listed, but in the order as presented here. We have the fireworks ordinance, tobacco, camping, Prospect
Noise.
Farms, skateboards and scooters, and noise ordinance. So I'm going to pass it on to Chief Purley because you were the one that kind of developed these and brought these forward in front of the board here. So I will yield the floor to you.
Thank you. And I would like to preface it that all of these ordinances were crafted at the direction of the board, the select board. About a year ago, Bob Thompson approached Julie and I and said, look at all the ordinances, see what we have, what we don't have, come up with some proposals. So I just want to preface it by saying that. So I guess we'll start in order, and I will tell you, first of all, every ordinance that is suggested is associated with some form of complaint that we've received from the citizenry in these categories in the, going on 4 years that I've been here. So these are not something we just dreamed up. These are directly related to complaints that we deal with and had no mechanism for enforcement to deal with them. What I'm trying to do by adding ordinances to the town roll is to avoid always defaulting to enforcing the criminal statute of disorderly conduct or the criminal statute of criminal trespass. That seems to be the only two things that apply with a lot of these, and that's kind of a heavy hammer to use for noise and fireworks and maybe somebody that's misusing property. It also becomes the only hammer we have, the only mechanism. We can either try to persuade people to stop doing what they're doing or arrest them for disorderly conduct or for criminal trespass, which are misdemeanors. It requires a criminal trial and all the trappings that go along with it. So I wanted something of a lower level. Ordinance fines go directly to the community, and it's a softer touch. And you always have those criminal statutes anyway. So, starting with the fireworks ordinance, a lot of the language in these ordinances were taken from other current successful ordinances or state statutes. The resources that I used were other towns, specifically Londonderry, Bedford, Freedom, New Hampshire, and I can't think of the other one. And also state statutes associated with fireworks, fire codes, and the like. So that's the source of a lot of the language. And many of them were pared down. The noise ordinance from Londonderry goes on for 4 pages, and it was pretty, I wouldn't say oppressive, but it was pretty heavily regulated. But it's also a very densely populated urban area. So starting with the fireworks ordinance, again, the purpose as described there, we currently have no town regulations on the use of fireworks other than reckless conduct, if somebody was firing off fireworks during a high fire danger, disorderly conduct, disturbing the peace. The section 2 talks about the prohibition if you don't have a permit. Obviously we have a permitted display every year in town, and that this would not apply to that or interfere with it in any way, shape, or form. As you can see, there's exemptions built into, there's exemptions I think built into every ordinance, so that to show that it's a balance between enforcement and people's free rights. The exemptions to equipment are certain fireworks, party poppers, snaps, snakes, sparklers, and morning glories. I can't tell you exactly what all of those things are. I think I know what they are, but that language is taken directly from the state fireworks statute. Those are the things they identify as not really being fireworks. A sparkler is not a firework, so nobody's going to get a ticket for having a sparkler. And the penalties on every ordinance is $100 for the first offense, $250 for a subsequent offense within a 12-month period. And the process for paying it and challenging it are the same as for a parking ticket, which is also based on an ordinance. So if you get a parking ticket, you have a certain period of time to pay it, you can contest it, and you can have a due process hearing on the ordinance, because that's the law, and that's the Constitution, and that's what's fair. And then unused fireworks will be seized, so that if we go there and there's a fireworks complaint, handing out a $100 ticket, sometimes people don't care. But we will also have the authority to seize the fireworks, and then we can retain them or dispose of them pursuant to a court order, which is how we dispose of all evidence in the police department. So that's fireworks. That's the short course. Who has any questions? Yes, John.
In terms of the appeal process, does that involve the select board, or does that involve just you?
Well, there.
Or both?
Currently, when someone contests a parking ticket, now the state law says that if you contest a parking ticket, you're supposed to have a hearing with the town clerk. I don't think Karen wants to start having trials in the middle of her day. The same rule applied in Conway, but the town clerk never has the hearings. They defer it back to the police department. So if the officers or myself issue a parking ticket, someone comes in to contest it, we provide them with a due process hearing. That's the first bite at the apple. So say Sergeant Bootby issued a parking ticket. They can come in, they can talk to me, and they can tell me their story. I already have Sergeant Bootby's report and pictures of the violation. So then I weigh, mistake or ignoring the law, and eke out some measure of justice. It might be, no, you have to pay it. Okay, I'll void it. There were 2 violations, just pay 1, that kind of thing. Now, with violations that you would issue on a citation, if they were not happy with that, then they could go to court, because you can try town ordinances in the district court. So it doesn't just, it's not a kangaroo court, it ends with the guy in charge of issuing the ordinances. If they're not satisfied with my response, then they can go to District Northern and we can have a trial. So, yes, Dave?
Okay, I can drive down to Ossipee and buy rockets and Roman candles and all of it.
Yes.
Mortars.
Yes.
What is, I can have them, but I can't fire them off.
State law specifically says that those consumer-grade fireworks are lawful to purchase and possess, but each community is left to their own design to regulate them. So the state law allows purchase and possession, but they allow the towns to set their own regulations, which many towns do. Towns that don't have regulations like us are in that nebulous, what do we do? So that's the case.
I know in Maine, if you're the homeowner, you can shoot them off. If you can't go to somebody else's house without permission.
People have called us in the past all the time, and the answer is we don't have an ordinance. It's not illegal in Jackson. The state allows it, so you can buy fireworks.
But I'm just saying, as involved in a system, if I buy, like Dick said, if I go out and buy a bunch of mortars, in Maine, you can shoot them off yourselves without any penalty. This ordinance.
Yeah, you can modify it in any way you'd like. The problem, though, associated with fireworks is that whether it's on your property or not, if it's let's say it's a red flag day, and they're firing off skyrockets that go 500 feet in the air, and the tinders, the embers come down a quarter of a mile away and start a fire, they're going to be putting it out. But we have no way of really holding that person accountable, because I don't know if we're going to be able to prove that. So the use of the fireworks, the town has to decide, do we want to allow unfettered use of fireworks, no use of fireworks, or restricted use of fireworks? You can modify it in any way you want. But the complaints that we get are often a combination of fireworks and noise, because they create noise.
Noise goes with the fireworks.
And currently, we have no mechanism to regulate them.
Anybody have any comments?
Yeah, I'm broken hearted.
Broken hearted too. Yes.
I just have a question, and for you guys to answer is, how much of an issue has this been in terms of trying to follow up for complaints? Has it been strictly noise, or have there been fire concerns, or what have we actually experienced, or what are we trying to solve here?
Well, I'm trying to solve all of them, because I guess the history is, we get fireworks complaints primarily because of the noise they create, because people hear them, they don't necessarily see them. We investigate, and there's often fire danger associated, because this may come as a shock, but people who buy a lot of fireworks aren't necessarily well trained in them. So they're firing them off, they don't have a fire extinguisher handy. It's a fire danger area. We have a lot of rural wooded property, and also too, it's a high risk of injury activity. So people are setting off fireworks. It can create a demand on emergency services because they can get severely injured. So it's kind of all of those things.
Yeah, my question was, what is our experience then?
My experience is the volume of our calls are because the noise disturbs the neighbors, and we go there and we have to tell them to stop doing it, or we don't find out till the next morning. They're like, the neighbors were shooting off fireworks, and we go there and the neighbors might have left already or gone for the day, canoeing in this.
Have we had any fires?
No, so I don't remember ever having a fire started by fireworks. So we haven't had that issue. Our topography helps with forest fire danger big time, because even in the dry time of year, we have a lot of wet ground, a lot of rocky ground. I mean, it's still the possibility exists on a really bad red flag weather, but we've not had any bad experiences with fireworks starting fires.
How many calls have you had on fireworks, say, in the last year or so?
In the last year?
Well, I mean, since you've been here 4 years.
Probably at least 20.
So 5 a year.
5, 6 a summer.
And obviously, it's usually the wedding groups that I know in my neighborhood, I see that quite often, on a Saturday night, weddings, groups will set off fireworks pretty much every Saturday night.
I hear them too. My dog's fine, yeah.
Again, to me, it doesn't bother me, but again, that's why we're putting it up to everybody else if they want to do a vote. Sarah?
Alcohol is usually involved, isn't it?
Yes, let's get rid of alcohol too, right?
Yes.
We can go all the way down to everything, but go ahead, Sarah.
I'm unfamiliar with weddings and so on doing it, but I know 4th of July and
Sure.
New Year's Eve evening, usually on my road there have been
Sure,
fireworks.
absolutely.
So my concern is with this, will we put up a notice? I know they have how will people that, for instance, with our short-term rentals, how, they come in and go out, how will we let people know that this is an ordinance we have, or do we even have to worry about it and just say, oh, well, it's your obligation to know this, we don't allow it?
Well, we currently have all our ordinances on the town website, right?
Yeah, I mean, we could easily put something in with the tax bill.
Right, but again, for visitors, how would they know?
Well,
That's,
the owner of the house, depends on how you word it, but the owner of the house would be responsible for putting, I think they have packages and everything, like how to use your TV to everything else, so you
right.
could insert.
Doesn't necessarily mean they're gonna read either.
Yeah, we have mechanisms for public information. We have the town website, we have the police department Facebook page, we have public notices in the newspaper, we have public notices in the community. So, I mean, and the basic premise as well is that ignorance of the law is never an excuse. Everyone is obligated to know, seek permission first rather than assume it's permitted.
Okay, we'll get this later.
So that's how people find out.
And again, we're only looking at 5 or so per year, and it is up to your privilege, or not privilege, your authority to give a ticket or not give a ticket in this kind of situation. I mean, not every firework would necessarily constitute a ticket.
No, nothing in any ordinance takes away our discretion on how to handle it. What it does is it provides an enforcement mechanism should a gentle hand not work and it's short of a custody arrest, which I think is a little heavy-handed.
State your name.
Brian,
Brian. What's up?
what is the process of obtaining a permit? Like, is that a quick process, or how much does it cost money?
Well, the permit, the only ones we really have is the fireworks in town every year. That's the only one that we permit for.
Yeah, and this says that you would need a permit, so.
Right, so they would have to come to the select board and apply
Yeah,
for a permit.
that's for the big,
And fire.
I don't know the word I want, but
display.
Events.
That's the big commercial displays.
Professional, commercial.
Commercial displays.
They're the only ones that would be permitted really in the town.
So you wouldn't be able to obtain a permit?
Not on a weekly basis?
That's a state permit that the chief and I have to sign off on. It's not a town permit, it's a state permit.
It's fire regulated.
If you look up that statute, it referenced in the ordinance 160-B3, Roman 1, small b, that speaks generally to commercial displays of fireworks, and the laws differentiate between consumer fireworks and commercial displays, and the permits associated with that statute are the commercial displays. They're bonded, and they have insurance, and there's a whole checklist that mostly is Jay's, significant concern for Jay.
Peter?
One question, one comment. I assume this does pertain to firearms, just fireworks.
Fireworks and firearms are two different things.
I just wonder how sometimes you can differentiate between the two.
Fireworks are defined by statute as our firearms, so there's no confusion whatsoever.
Well, maybe not in statute, but in practice, I think there might be.
That might go under the noise ordinance, though. I mean, if you're firing off firearms in the middle of the night.
I would think, that a homeowner exemption might be something the selectmen would want to consider in this.
That's what I would consider.
That, there's lots of things that we can regulate and legislate for public safety. So I would love to see some consideration for primary homeowners or residents having the ability to do that if they like.
Denise?
Can you speak to, just out of curiosity, Conway, North Conway, Bartlett, do they have ordinances? I'm just curious to see if we're out of sync with everyone else, or if this is a trend that we're moving towards. And I understand what you're saying about the ordinances not being so heavy-handed.
Freedom, Madison, Ospey have ordinances on fireworks.
Okay.
They have some exemptions. I didn't see the homeowner exemption. Freedom has a real cheeky one that has to do with after the last inning of the Red Sox win of the pennant. It's kind of cheeky, and I didn't include it. A lot of this language is fashioned after that one because I thought it was cheeky, and
Yeah.
it's not a joke. It's an ordinance. So Conway has a noise ordinance that they may use versus a fireworks ordinance. I can't remember. And there's been, I've been away 6 years, so there could have been some changes.
So a noise ordinance would help to handle the fireworks noise issues after 10 o'clock and before 6, but it would not handle the fire danger issues, which sounds like something that you're also trying to address.
Yeah, all public safety aspects associated with fireworks. The difference is, with that ordinance, I can confiscate fireworks. I can't confiscate noise. So if you had a noise complaint and I went there, let's say we just had a noise ordinance and I go to a fireworks complaint and I say, hey, we got a noise ordinance, it's a $100 fine if you make a lot of noise, at this particular hour. Okay, chief, we'll be quiet. I leave, they still have the fireworks, off they go. So I don't have a mechanism to confiscate the fireworks to prevent. I can document and apprehend and enforce, but I don't have a mechanism to prevent. So that would be a substantial difference.
Thank you.
I would think if you're going to make an exemption, as Peter suggested, for the homeowner, then you have the issue of underage kids doing them, and it would seem to me that would be an even greater danger than alcohol-abused adults. So I would recommend not to have an exemption for homeowners.
Chris?
Hi, yes, thank you. So if there was a complaint about fireworks and the police respond and the person the complaint was made against was required to give over their fireworks, would that, in order, give the police probable cause to search? Or if they didn't want to give up their fireworks, what would you do then? What tools would be in your resources? And then at what legality would the person the complaint was made against, how much would they they have to let you in to search if you didn't believe them, or how would that go?
No, I get you. And I just got an update. Conway has a full ordinance ban, and Bartlett has a ban in the village for fireworks. So, question about searching. We went to a fireworks complaint, and there were visible fireworks. They could be seized if that ordinance is in place the way they're written. If they were not visible, let's say they have them in their home, we could ask for them to voluntarily give them up. If they didn't voluntarily give them up, we would have probable cause to believe they may still have fireworks, but probable cause to believe they have an illegal item in their home isn't permission to search. Permission to search only comes from permission that they give you, exigent circumstances, meaning the evidence is going to be lost or destroyed unless you take immediate action, or a valid search warrant. We're not going to apply for a search warrant for a fireworks complaint. People would either voluntarily give them, we would seize them, and in plain view, which is an exception to the search warrant requirement, we may seize them. And in some cases, we may not seize them at all, because we go there and they might go, oh my gosh, we come from, Fireworks, Tennessee, and you can shoot them off every day, and we had no idea. Okay, no problem. You're up for the week, you got a great understanding, put them away, and no more problems. So we wouldn't have to take anything.
Or they lie to you and then shoot them off again, and then you get the second call. And then
Have a fun start.
The second call's a little different conversation.
I like to think positive.
Any other?
Penny has a question.
Penny?
I guess for 5 calls average a year for fun that lasts minutes, this seems pretty heavy-handed to me. I think the next thing we'd have to post a sign on either side of Route 16 saying no fireworks, so we can add another sign to
Right.
our village. And it's been proven difficult. It's not easy to set these woods on fire. If anything, those lantern things that people set up that actually have a lit flame.
Those are illegal
Those are illegal, there you go. Already taken care of.
in the entire state.
And by the, for the police to investigate, by the time they get there, if they can even tell which house it came from, the fireworks
Well,
are,
we often can, so
No.
that's not really an operational issue.
But,
People
I mean,
will tell us, they'll say it's coming from there.
I mean, I hear fireworks from where our house is located and hear them regularly, and it's 5 minutes of fun that happens with people celebrating for whatever reason. I don't see the need for another ordinance.
I guess, but I kind of agree with Chris in a certain way that it is a mechanism. It's there, it's enforceable, we have it on the books. If it isn't there, then he has really very little leg to stand on in terms of people being uncooperative. Like I said, I agree with you, it doesn't happen very often. I think it is something that, I kind of agree with Peter in the sense that, I think we should have some sense that we are reasonable people. We should be able to watch out for our own children. Obviously we don't want anybody hurt or anything like that. But it is, I know in other communities they do allow them at their own home, and I personally have in favor of that myself. But I don't know anybody else.
Yeah, I think what somebody said, people don't necessarily know how to use fireworks well, no matter who you are, so.
Some people don't know how to drive well.
Right. Can't take their cars away. Too.
Right,
So, I mean,
exactly.
you're really you're putting something out there that you're trying to create public safety and prevent noise, but you're still gonna
You
have.
can't prevent people
do
from
it.
hurting themselves.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
ultimately true.
So.
Penny, one more
I
time?
was gonna say, what's the difference between me going down and doing target practice for an hour on my own property in terms of sound and disturbance and safety concerns, and some people can't drive either handguns or.
Well, these are often at midnight. That's one of the issues with these.
The noise ordinance could
I
take
agree.
care of that.
I agree.
So you're duplicating ordinances, and it's, again, by the time the police get there, they're
Often done.
they're expensive. It's what it themselves.
No, I agree. Wills?
You just made a point, and
What was it?
more
I
times
forgot.
than not, I know what Sarah's talking about. I hear them and see them. They don't bother me. I think it's, the neighborhood might be a problem, but in most cases, this is late nights. And are you even, you know, you're gonna be able to enforce that the next morning if it's 12:35 a.m. and somebody calls the dispatch and says, hey, these people next door are setting off fireworks, is this even gonna be enforceable? If we don't have anybody on, is somebody gonna cover that? Are we gonna even be able to do that?
Yes.
You are.
And let me give you a perfect example. Last summer, we had a call, and that, this is not the noise ordinance, this is why the fireworks ordinance is a better application. Last summer, I got a call, it's probably 10 o'clock in the morning. The call was from a party that said, last night, there was a lot of fireworks being fired off from this particular home on Moody Farm Road. Okay? Gave the address, I go and I find the house. There is clear evidence of the discharge of fireworks. You know, the
debris,
all the remnants of fireworks. The people were not there. Presumably they were out recreating. I assume it's middle of summer. So I was able to, I left a note about the risk of using fireworks and so on and so forth. So it can, whether you're there or not, it can be effectively investigated just like any other crime. We don't witness every crime. We don't work when every crime occurs, but we can effectively investigate them. However, if it continued, I don't have a mechanism to do anything about it. And I understand it doesn't bother everybody. No activity bothers everybody because there's always going to be somebody who says, I love it. But at least 20 times, that's just a generality. At least 20 times somebody in town was disturbed. And I want to be able to serve all of them. So that's why the proposal.
Okay, a couple more comments and we're gonna move on.
Yeah, hi, Bill Terry. The comment I would make is that, and I'm not sure if everyone has the same experience I do, but most of the times I'm hearing fireworks, it's from the lodging venues with weddings. Lodging venues with weddings. And I live between two of them and we hear them and see them. And it's okay, usually it's a wedding celebration. My point is that if you put this kind of ordinance in place, you're still going to have a permitting process, apparently, that's going to allow them to do so. Well, that says that you have a permitting process.
Commercial permitting process. That's why you should add that, commercial.
It says by permit of the town of Jackson to do so. It does not say commercial.
Yeah, we talked about that earlier. I don't know if you missed that. The only commercial permit we allow is the 4th of July.
It's not stated in here.
Okay, well, I understand what you're saying, but that's, we discussed that and we thought that, you know, this should be only commercial
And
issues.
So what you're saying is that the 40 or 50 times that this occurs now every year, you're going to shut down the fireworks at those venues and make them less acceptable as a potential place for them to hold wedding celebrations. And if I'm understanding this correctly, and those folks, I think, are probably handling them quite well right now, but it's going to target them. So I'll just make that comment.
Okay.
I have a question.
Sure.
Do those fireworks displays in the public venues, are they by permit? Like, are they some kind of permit from the fire department? Or do they just do it?
They just do it.
And they're regular, and they're every week.
We've given, the Jackson Park ones. Whitney's did apply for a wedding, an official commercial event in the winter. That's it. But I have gotten a couple inquiries about, and Whitney's did have a wedding that they went through the process on.
Would the amendment proposed by Peter of property owner exemption, would that cure that problem? Because the property owners, it's their property, the commercial properties.
Commercial properties.
Well, it says property owners, so
Right.
if Ellie's.
Could be non-commercial properties. Jeff?
The application says it's to the select board. The select board can make a decision, it is Whitney's or Christmas Farm Inn or whatever. If in your opinion it was safe to do it, and it was a commercial, if there's a state licensed person operating it, then that would be at your discretion to offer the permits.
Well, that's what we do right now, yeah.
Right, so I mean, I think your question about weddings and appropriately managed displays is covered in your.
Well, I think most of these weddings, if I'm correct, are mostly just private people, you know, with a couple fireworks here and there. It's not like a commercial display. Yeah, no, we're not talking, you know, a 20, 30-minute display of, you know, 600 elements going off. You know, it's pretty quick and short. I don't think that would be something that we would permit for, if I understand that correctly, because they wouldn't go through the fire department. There wouldn't be anything that would be controlled, I guess, that way. So I wouldn't be permitting any weddings, I don't think. I mean, what do you think about that? Permitting weddings for fireworks?
I don't know how often that happens.
Not very much, I know one that, and I don't know if they actually apply.
And I think if you open that can of worms, you'll have more than one. That's what I'm worried about.
Yeah, you know, my sense is that the complaints we get really are not associated with weddings or, you know, like with the shuttle handle or the Wentworth. They're residences where people are whooping.
Right, it's after the wedding, usually
Or,
often.
yeah, whether they're associated with wedding or not, we don't know. You know, we don't go there and say, who got married? Stop firing.
Is it the intent to put these on the warrant, or is it just to get, so you want to get this so you can put it on the warrant this coming year? Just based on comments and time.
Yep.
I don't know that you should get this the same time as budget. That's
Or whether we have
only.
to tweak the wording to, you
I
know, make it
understand.
more accommodating.
I was thinking you may be just doing this to
Yeah.
adopt ordinances or regulations or whatever, that you're going to put on the warrant, it's got to be done.
Anybody else on that?
If everyone feels like there's a lot more discussion that needs to be had on all of these, we can set up another meeting, because we only have the room until 7.
Right, so we gotta move on a little bit.
We were here first. We were here first.
All right, moving on to tobacco products ordinance.
Mine is,
Oh, I'm sorry. Mine is out of order. Okay. You have noise next?
I do have noise on mine, but you must have the old ones.
I must have the old one, I'm sorry.
No, I didn't.
Moving on to the noise ordinance. Is that the order?
No, you're right, you're the right order. Dick and I have the old ones, I think.
All right, what's next?
You go with yours.
oh, right, I got
It is
mine a week
tobacco.
ago.
Oh, okay, this is the one that has the black writing on it?
Right.
That's what we're looking, you're looking at the old one, okay, all
So what
right.
are we gonna do?
We're gonna do tobacco next. All right, Chris.
This ordinance is drafted because we've got complaints about people smoking and vaping when we have public gatherings. We don't really have any regulations associated with it. What we did notice is that, and in fact Julie pointed out, she says, well, you can't smoke in the town, but it's a town personnel policy. We have a no tobacco use policy for the people who work here, but there was nothing saying you can't smoke on town property or use tobacco products. So that's why this is drafted. And it incorporates other things to smoking, because as everybody knows, you know, the
Things are changing.
vaping is very similar, you know, or e-cigarettes, whatever you want to call it, to smoking. So the use of tobacco, it restricts the use of tobacco on properties owned by the town of Jackson to include buildings, structures, properties, parks, municipal parking lots, or town green spaces. And then the tobacco products definition is right from the statute. I didn't, no liberties with it, didn't make it up. That is what they describe as a tobacco product and e-cigarette, so it fits into the definition of the regulation. The exemptions, this is not an ordinance you could use against an underage person. In the state of New Hampshire, people who are 12 years of age and older are subject to tobacco regulations under 126K. When, as far as the hierarchy of enforcement goes, if you have a state statute, you cannot have a town ordinance that trumps a state statute. For instance, you can't make it against a town ordinance to speed on a roadway so you can gather revenue from speeding tickets. So anybody who's 12 or older would be subject to this state statute if we chose to enforce it, not this. This one says 18 or older. From 12 to 18, you can actually get a 12-year-old get a ticket and go to court, which is horrible, but that's what the law says. And the penalty, again, the penalty mechanism and the due process mechanism of every ordinance is exactly the same. $100 fine for the first, $250 for a second subsequent within 12-month period. After that, it goes back to the 100. Payable within 5 days. If you fail to answer it or remit, and this is common language with every ordinance, it's another violation of something. It's called failure to answer summons. And you have a right to have a due process hearing, and then if you don't have it, then, or you're not satisfied, you can go to court. And if you can't, turn somebody upside down and shake money. So, and that's to, to protect the quality of life and use of town of Jackson properties. Currently, you can't smoke in a public building, but if somebody walked in here with a vaporizer or e-cigarette, there would be no regulation to stop them. They could, the only regulation that exists is currently you cannot use tobacco products or e-cigarettes on school properties. Actually, is summonable and arrestable offense, but not town.
Thank you. Any comments on tobacco?
I like that one.
Yes.
One quick one, would that include sidewalks?
Good question.
It's not town property, it's all state property.
All
State.
That's all,
There you go.
it's not town property.
So sidewalks would be okay.
So somebody can't walk up on Prospect Farm and smoke a cigarette or smoke a pipe?
That would mean?
Right.
As it's written, if enacted, yes, but subject to modification in any fashion. You can modify, you can motion or modify these in any way to get to the final language that the town is. It's not all or nothing.
I'm not a smoker or use tobacco in any way, but it just seems like it's stumping up other people's rights as well. I mean, there's always, we live in a rural area, people can walk away or move, or if it's only a problem during public gatherings, is there another way to address it during public gatherings instead of somebody, sitting in their car smoking a cigarette, happening to be in a library parking lot there?
And again, Prospect Farm, that's about as wide open as you can get up there. I mean, what possible, influence could you have in a Prospect Farm? I mean,
You could write, Prospect Farm property accepted. The problem is if you eliminate the word, public properties, if you try to modify that, then that's going to be all public property. So if there's a place that you feel shouldn't be regulated, you can add that language. None of these are carved in stone tablets. You can modify them any way you'd like. Like with Pete's suggestion of homeowners, this is the discussion to get to consensus and get to the ballot, because ultimately these are ballot questions.
right. Ken?
One possibility to consider here is secondhand smoke is a real danger to other people who aren't smoking, is just to include buildings and structures, and then leave the open spaces as is.
Somebody else have anything? Denise?
Yeah, well, I was kind of along the same lines, because the river walk down here that has a couple benches, if no one's around, it's the same argument really as Prospect Farm. And believe me, I am never been, never will be a smoker. However, I don't see any harm if somebody is having a cigarette, sitting on the bench, watching the river go by, and it's the middle of the week and no one's around anyway. So the public gathering might be appropriate. I don't know if that might be a fuzzy thing.
I definitely get what you're saying.
Yeah.
What's counterintuitive and kind of the interesting part is the majority of the complaints are in public gathering, open spaces.
Right.
We get complaints about people smoking and vaping at public gatherings. So yes, common sense would be, well, that's not a big deal. Nobody's going to be bothered. It's really the buildings to worry about, and that's not what people.
But that's where you're getting the complaints.
That's where the complaints are coming from. Yeah.
Yeah, I would think public gatherings would be something like the duck race out in the park. I mean, that would be something that would certainly, I would like not to have people smoking around kids, especially.
The majority of our complaints come from.
Right, so I mean, if it's an organized public gathering as opposed to walking down the river, that would be a different game of wax.
Well, and I want to point out, somebody could come in tomorrow and start vaping or next week at Selectmen meeting. You have no regulation to stop it.
Here, yeah. I'm talking about an open space. Joe?
Yeah, there is another open space by the falls, and there's nothing worse than sitting there and trying to enjoy the falls and someone's smoking up from you and you can't get away from it. So
Valid point.
it's going to get real hard to define this. I think you kind of got to go one way or the other to stick with it.
Well, I think what's good about the ordinance, about having it versus not having it, is not the four corners of the document, but the people that enforce it. For instance, you're enjoying your time at the falls, and there's a group of people smoking their brains out, whatever they're smoking, and it's bothering me. And we're on regular patrol, and you're like, it's really bothering me, or it's bothering my kids, they're coughing, it's a mess. With the ordinance, we can go up and say, hey, folks, you can't smoke on public property. And that's not really that unusual in ordinance, but we could always say, you're gonna have to safely extinguish your items and stop smoking. So that's not, smoking in public places is not a huge infringement on people's rights, because generally you can't. But it gives us a mechanism to ask without enforcement, and then if denied, some mechanism of enforcement. So it's, everybody's not getting a ticket for every activity. It gives us some authority.
And isn't a lot of this driven by the complaint? You're not just going out patrolling for smokers. I mean, there has to be...
We don't go on cigarette patrolling.
A complaint. I mean, fireworks, I mean, that's what you're saying is, it gives you the power if there is a complaint.
My original point is that all of these areas are complaint driven. In fact, there was when Julie and I went over the ordinances, we came up with some areas that were vacuous with regulation, and one of them was drinking in public. But I didn't draft an ordinance because nobody's complained about it. So I'm like, okay, well, nobody's complaining about it, so it's currently not a problem. So yeah, these are areas where people have complained, and I have a strict prohibition with the staff that they are absolutely forbidden from ever saying the phrase, "There's nothing I can do." And it's not. I don't say that tongue in cheek. I've told everyone. So, but without the ordinance, we get very close to that, to say there's nothing I can do. So that's why I'm suggesting at the direction of the Selectmen.
Okay.
Another concern is, again, how do you enforce that? How do you post it? Does it mean more signs at Jackson Falls, more signs in the park, more signs, more signs?
Again, I think it's the enforcement level. I think, it's, I don't think, I think the falls is a perfect example. Somebody's got a bunch of kids down there and people are smoking cigarettes or whatever. And now we can somebody can complain and get somebody down there to do something about it. Now, like I said, Chris doesn't have to throw the fine at them, but it's there. Now, whether they know there's an ordinance or not, that's his job to inform them at that time. And, obviously, we're not going to put up signs for every single ordinance that's going to be in this town. There is, there's no excuse for not knowing the law. And if he has to inform them verbally, I don't think it's going to be necessarily that intrusive to, these people are going to walk out with a $100 ticket. I don't think that's going to be the case. It's going to be more information than anything else.
Hasn't so far. There's a lot of laws we enforce, so. And we don't have to post signs.
Anywhere.
Signs are like so 80s. Many electronic mediums that we can put out the word. I don't think signs is a component of any of this suggestion. To put fears aside, signs are not an issue.
Yeah, Phil Terry, I just one comment. I from my perspective, I'd say I do the whole thing. The only real concern I have here is around parks and the inclusion of parks. And my guess is, and I don't know this from experience, but my guess is we probably haven't had too many people say, somebody's smoking up at Prospect Farm, can you do something about it? Possibly maybe at the falls, but again, I would doubt that you've had that many complaints of people saying somebody's smoking at the falls, can you do something about it? And for everything else, I would agree 100%.
Anybody else?
Hey John, would anyone have a problem if we shift gears, come right back to this right after the budget hearing, because it's important to get through this stuff?
I'm sorry?
Would you mind if we picked up on the ordinances as soon as we went through the budget?
Sure.
If that's a kind of
Okay.
Does anyone have an issue with that?
Anybody mind moving to the money versus the ordinances?
It seems like there's a lot more discussion than
Okay, Prospect Farm.
Prospect Farm.
First and foremost, what you see for the ordinance, this may come as a shock to everybody, especially the people most intimately associated with Prospect Farm, which is not me. This ordinance is an exact duplicate of the current rules of Prospect Farm. No additions or deletions. Now, it came as a surprise to many people, many concerned people, because it emphasizes residents only, but the current rules emphasize residents only. I do not have the authority to make rules or law, I enforce them, so I didn't think it was really appropriate where rules already existed to change it in any way. So I took the current rules for Prospect Farm and transferred them into the ordinance. Now, since that time, I've had discussions with a few people that there is a use agreement with Prospect Farm with Jackson Ski Touring Foundation. So, and so that obviously was red flags. It's like, whoa, wait a minute, people aren't going to be able to ski at Prospect Farm. So, what I would suggest is that the language be added to this ordinance that says, agreements notwithstanding between the Board of Selectmen and other persons or organizations, the following shall apply. Because there's already agreements with organizations that, fee-based use of Prospect Farm for cross-country skiing. Now, that doesn't address like people hiking in there in the summertime or anything, but that's up to the town, because currently the rules say only residents are supposed to be there. I couldn't even go there on, other than in an official capacity, if we're following the rules as they are already outlined. So.
The intent of that statement was, I think, not for people hiking, but for the snow machines. It was not going to be open to the general public for snow machines up there. It was going to be for residents only.
Right, but there lacks a great deal of clarity in the current rules, which make it a problem for my agency, because if we get a call or complaint, how do
That's why I say it was the intent,
right.
whether the words came out correctly or not.
Snowmobile provision was added in 1982. It said residents only. However, all of the rules have always said residents only.
But that came from the will.
Right, a little bit of history. The will specifically refers to Prospect Farm being bequeathed for the use of inhabitants. The legal definition of inhabitants is persons who regularly habitate and live within a region, which makes it residents. However, also in the will, it refers to Prospect Farm as a public park. I personally see that as a conflict, but maybe that conflict was resolved 100 years ago because I wasn't here. So it stands that the rules are for residents only. I'm not advocating for that. I'm just saying that's as it stands. So that was, because this already existed, that became the foundation for the proposed ordinances. The other ordinances didn't exist. So that's why.
I wish Billy would stay, because he had made a comment to me earlier about the snowmobile thing, not that it maybe matters, but the snowmobile portion of that was voted in at a town meeting, and the only way that that rule can be taken out of existence is by a vote of the town meeting.
This ordinance doesn't take it out, because the ordinance is exactly what I'm saying.
But there should be something added for the use of the cross-country skiers, because otherwise anybody who lived out of town couldn't use it, technically.
No, and that's why I suggested that language be, notwithstanding, because maybe the Boy Scouts are going to go up there and camp and they're from Mattapan. I don't know. Maybe another group is going to go up there and say, hey, can we camp up there? I don't know. Like, the current rules say residents only, and that's a conflict for us because I know many people, and we don't want to go up and kick everybody out who's not a resident, nor do we have a great ability to do it. But that component may be a story for another day. But as far as the ordinance language, to cure the ski touring conflict, it should include that language I suggested, or I think it should.
I agree with you. Okay. Any other comments on Prospect Farm?
Well,
go ahead. Brian?
So how does that pertain to people, non-residents in the summer? If they're riding their bike, they can't be at Prospect Farm?
Chris?
I don't know, because, people use it. They go hiking all the time.
Sure.
And I think that's fantastic, but the rules say it's only for residents. So
right, but we're saying to amend it so that it helps ski touring. But if we're going to amend it, wouldn't we say people are riding their bikes in the summer as non-residents too?
And how constrained are we by the will see, I know that the history of the will said residents, but if we decide that it's owned by the town but have general use, are we constrained by the terms of the will?
I can ask legal.
Yeah, that's a legal
I
question.
mean, really, that's kind of where we stand, right? If the will says this is what we can do, we can't help,
Right.
right? We can't help.
I mean, in
But we are
practice,
helping by, we made an agreement with Ski Touring.
right, in practice, you already have for many,
Okay.
That's my point, like,
Yeah.
why make the agreement?
But that's an
in one direction?
organization versus a one-on-one. We have
Well,
no
you could have an
organization that
organization.
says mountain biking,
They certainly do. They're all over the place.
not with this town, though.
Not in the town, not within the town of Jackson like the ski
But
touring
I'm just saying
is.
right now, so.
Right, but someone could tomorrow.
Ken?
I think though, as Chief Pearlie pointed out, and I haven't had a chance to go back and read it, but there's actually two elements. And so it's a question of which is championing. But as this ordinance is written right now, I could not have some friends of mine who came to visit me that are not residents of Jackson.
Correct.
Legally hiking.
Right.
This is much deeper than the Jackson Ski Touring Foundation.
Yes. Right.
That's a starting point.
Right.
And the second point.
Are you gonna arrest somebody because they're not this kind of hiking?
Well, according to
Again,
the ordinance, you ought to.
He has the discretion to do
Right
that.
now,
Yes.
that's,
Okay, Ken, I'm sorry?
yeah. And if the will is also saying a public park, then it's an interpretation issue as to which of these two champion, which obviously needs to be sorted out before we get totally lost in the weeds about just part one. But normally when you have an intention that's in there as a public park, that is a broader interpretation than just inhabitants.
Can I point something out?
Sure.
100% agree with you. However, you know, the effect of unintended consequences. If you ask legal and they say,
Yeah.
oh, inhabitants means residents, that trumps, and it's residents only, where do you go?
Yep.
That may be a vagary you want to capitalize on versus clarify. Just
Why do we need an ordinance anyways?
I'm
Is
sorry?
it, have there been complaints about?
Yeah, we did have, well, this is the history of it. We had a conflict last winter with snowmobilers. So we had to look into that. I looked at the rules. The rules say very clearly, residents only. However, there were some interpretations of, what about guests? Like you said, you know, what about guests of residents? Being a person who reads statutes and laws, they say that language doesn't exist. It doesn't make an accommodation for that.
Yes.
Now, we didn't take any enforcement action, but it did prompt that issue along with the question of ordinances, because when I looked at Prospect Farm and town property, I'm like, there's no regulation up there other than a set of rules that have no enforcement.
Mechanism.
And then we look even further and say, wait a minute, everything says residents only. Even we were talking about the key policy. Prospect Farm has a key policy that people can sign out the key to open the gate. For Prospect Farm, it says no motorized vehicles.
You have to walk it around the gate.
And then it also specifically mentions snowmobiles, and then in parentheses says residents only, 1982. So, you know, this is what prompted it. It was complaint-based, and then we looked at the history. We did start to look at the vagaries of the language and like, hey, this is a conflict that has to be resolved.
Jay?
Sorry if I may disagree with you a little bit, which is okay, but I've always, when I thought about ordinances like fireworks ordinance as fire chief, I've always kind of thought of ordinances as one complaint a year on something, or even maybe 2 complaints a year, 3. You don't necessarily create an ordinance to solve 1 or 2 things. You have 10, 15, 20 complaints, then it would validate creating an ordinance. So I don't always agree with creating an ordinance if you have very minimal issues.
This already exists, though. That's it. As rules.
Which, again, results in one mechanism, criminal trespass, misdemeanor, arrestable offense. Now, the way I tend to look at enforcement and the strategy of statutes is they should be designed for prevention, not for apprehension. If we have one complaint and you see a vacuum of rule or law or ordinance, then you should try to fill that with something, because I don't want to wait for 20 problems. If somebody goes up there and gets a motorhome or builds a building on the property or camp, and then they're all summer with, waste and all the impact, what do I do? So that's all. I want to look at prevention. If they're complaint based, where do we go from that? I don't want to wait for 20 complaints, because then people are up in arms.
Hi, Tom from the Conservation Commission. The Conservation Commission is looking at updating the forest management plan for Prospect Farm, and as part of that, we've been discussing that there is no general management plan for Prospect Farm. And so we're looking at in the next year hiring someone to make a management plan for Prospect Farm, which will address these issues. So I guess I think this issue perhaps is a little premature, and the town could put some money into it over the next year to look at it and come up with a better way, just decide what it is we want to do. Is it legal in terms of that deed? Because we've always interpreted it as the land was given to the town to be used as a public park, not to be used strictly for residents of the town. And that these special uses were for town members above and beyond general walking access, or however you want to design kind of the traditional uses. So I would say there's, on the ground, there's a totally different interpretation of how you can access that, who can access the land up there. So I would hope that we could kind of push this out, and if there's something that we needed to maybe pare this down, but sit down with the Conservation Commission, the Select Board, and we would come up with something like a deal with safety and look at it over the next year and come back in the future.
I think it's a good starting point, but I agree with you. I think it's something, we could do a little better job of figuring out what to do with this piece of property, and it might involve, legal in terms of determining the law in terms of the will part.
And I think the snowmobile issue is a great thing, because the town has agreed, yes, we can snowmobile there, and yes, we're letting ski touring groom it, and those things are totally not gonna happen at the same point in time without somebody getting really mad and upset, which would be a bad situation that we don't want to happen.
And
That's why we got the
I think that one would have to be reversed at a town meeting, because I think that was approved at a town meeting.
Right, that's what Jay was saying.
Yeah.
Sarah?
Well, I think Brian had a good point. When you do talk about this, if I have my family up and I want to go up there and stuff, if you do make a kind of a rule or whatever, if a resident goes up from there with their family or friends of their family and they're with their family.
Right, you can say residents and guests.
Right, because I summer someplace and they have, if you're a
Private
property
beaches.
owner,
Yep.
and you go to the beach, you have to be there at the beach with your guests. It's not
Good
like
point.
you can just send the guests up or do something, so.
Right. Ken?
Yeah, there are some challenges here that, and being the newbie on the Conservation Commission, I fully agree with what Tom just said, but, even these limitations on wheeled motorized vehicles, to get to the Forest Service parking lot that accesses the Forest Service property, you actually have to drive up the Class 6 road in the summer.
Yeah.
In the what? In the summer. Now, Boggy Brook, I don't believe is a Class 6 road. And once you hit the gate, it's a White Mountain National Forest Road, which means it's not.
The Class 6 road goes beyond Prospect Farm Gate by quite a ways.
I'm talking Boggy Brook.
Oh, right, okay.
I'm just giving that, the Oil Trail would be the same example. Once you hit those gates and you're on Forest Service property.
On the right side, yeah.
Yeah, and on the left on the Oil, because you just go a very short distance and then you hit the gate. From that point on, but to get out to the parking lot that the Forest Service just rebuilt on Boggy Brook to access the trails, because before it was on private land. This, as written, would not allow you to legally drive out to the Forest Service access point to hike up into Carter Notch or Perkins Notch.
Well, that's all on town land, so you'd effectively, my understanding of that is the town had an agreement with the Forest Service when the Forest Service logged out, that it was the Forest Service, in return for crossing town property to get out to federal land, would build the town a new parking lot on town land to be used for the public. And I don't know the legal details of that at all, but that's the oral history I have. Right.
And that's why the Conservation Commission is asking to have some time to go back and just take
That's a good
these
idea.
into consideration, because it's a big law issue.
Right.
Hi, Bill Terry, I'm also on the Conservation Commission. We first ran into this, you're right, because these are the roles that are pretty much in the will. But what I learned as being part of that group is that the town has, whether they're doing it legally or illegally, the town has made agreements both with the Jackson Ski Touring Foundation, they have made agreements with the United States Forest Service, and those agreements have been done by select people. I don't know whether or not you had counsel advising you or not, but you have offered out some things. Part of what I have learned from folks in the Conservation Commission, Brian probably helped me out on this, if people have been using the trails and have been using things, you begin to lose some of the ability to enforce people using things adversely. So I think you have a real legal conundrum here with where you sit, and to put this out as an ordinance and try to give Chris an opportunity, which I think would be useful, would also put him in a real quandary as well. So I think you're not helping him by putting this out here, because your own board has countermanded these rules. And I think you have a real legal problem with where you're sitting.
I'm so happy.
Why, because you have another meeting after this? Yeah, I think it does need some more work, there's no doubt about it at this point.
Are we increasing legal again?
No, no.
Any other comments?
It's just reality.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
We keep moving, we only have 2 left.
15 minutes.
Moving ahead.
Moving ahead, let's see, which one we skipped? We did, camping?
I'm the one at skateboard, but we can talk about camping and the last skateboard.
Camping?
Oh, camping. Camping, so camping.
We'll give you that. We do all those at once.
We had multiple complaints about motorhomes. When I say motorhomes, camper motorhomes. On town property, camping. There is a fairly popular trend known as boondocking, where people have, self-contained units, RVs, made or otherwise, and they find unregulated pieces of property where they camp. We had a camper on the library parking lot. We had a camper up at the Black Mountain turnaround, which is also the highway department, the Moon Road area. We have absolutely no regulations whatsoever on town property for camping. They could have stayed there all summer, and we couldn't enforce anything because we don't have an overnight parking ban, which I don't really think we need, because people might park overnight or something, which usually cures that. But we have no regulation. One stayed, 3 or 4 days, moved along. The other was a bulk of the summer. And that can create a problem, overuse of the property, human waste, and the like. So it was an area of complaint that we have no regulation. Now, currently, you may read in news or hear in the news that some camping ordinances get challenged on constitutional grounds because they the advocates allege that they're criminalizing the homeless. I have read those Supreme Court cases. I have read the articles associated with those challenges. I believe that this ordinance would pass constitutional muster because it is not a strict prohibition on camping, because courts have determined that if you have a strict prohibition like parking in the city, camping in the city park, they say you're criminalizing homelessness because they have no other alternative and they can't access anything else. This is not a strict prohibition on camping. They can get permission depending on the duration and the situation. So I think that provision of this ordinance would weather any challenge on criminalizing homelessness, which certainly is not my intention. So it would make it unlawful to camp without written permission from the Board of Selectmen or their designee. I'd like to have those things in ordinances. The authority is the Selectmen, but I'd like them to defer that authority to their designee, whether it's town hall, police. Often it's the police because we're out in the field. But that way, it doesn't flood the board with petitions to camp, and you're not here every day. The staff is, so that's why that provision is in there. To camp on property owned by the town of Jackson, parks, municipal parking lots, public streets, or town green spaces. There's currently no law that would prevent anybody from pitching a, four-person tent in the middle of the town green by the
Ball field.
pond, in the ball field, and camping all summer. Camping and RV in the parking lot. So, the definition of camping, well, that's what's happening. And we saw it. I mean, we saw it. It was the first time that I've seen it. We had campers all over the place. I'm like, why are there campers? Well, I'll tell you why there's campers. Because we don't have any regulations. My brother-in-law is boondocking across the southwestern United States, and that's exactly what they do. They seek out that property. There's websites and groups and all those things. So, for us, overnight stay, the definition of an overnight stay, because we don't have overnight parking there, any activity that involves an overnight stay, whether sheltered or unsheltered, or within a conveyance. So if they're laying on the ground in a camp, in a sleeping bag, whether they're laying out, whether they're in a car, in an RV, or in a tent. An overnight stay occurs when activities commonly associated with the preparation for an overnight stay, that is what an overnight stay is. So there's no challenge of, well, I'm not sleeping and the evening hasn't passed yet, because then you really haven't stopped the problem. The problem has occurred. The period of time to clarify overnight stay is the same period of time used in every statute that identifies nighttime, and that's a half an hour after sunset until a half an hour prior to sunrise. So, for instance, if you're RVing and you want to go to Jackson and you park in the library park.
After going through the covered bridge.
Yeah. And you stop in the parking lot and your family's having lunch and you're walking around the town, no problem, no prohibition. It's 10 o'clock at night, the shades are drawn, the generator's running, people are watching television, the kids are in the jammies. That's preparation for an overnight stay. That's the problem. I wrote in this exception because we already have regulations on camping. And exception C, this is not an exemption, exception C under camping is, except for rules associated with Prospect Farm, kindling of a fire while camping on town property is prohibited. Because you can kindle a fire on Prospect Farm if you have the fire chief's permission.
Not without written permission from the home landowner.
Well, no, the Prospect Farm rules say, if
Doesn't
they
matter
get
the
permission
state,
from
the
you.
state rules, in order to kindle a fire, you have, and it's not your own personal property, you have to have permission from the landowner.
Well, good, then this is consistent with that. So it says, even if you're allowed to camp, you cannot kindle a fire at any time. Because you can get permission. The prohibition specifically exempts persons or organizations that have obtained prior written permission from the Board of Selectmen or the designated camp in a specific area for a specific time. Permissible camping be allowed and follow carry and carry-out guidelines with the town of Jackson. So, for instance, a group of whatever, I don't know, a group of volunteers for the duck race say, we're coming up from Rhode Island and we love duck races and we want to help. We've got no place to stay, we're saving a couple bucks, can we camp, in the town park for one overnight, and we have 10 volunteers. Great, you say yes, written permission, how many people carry and carry out. Or somebody's driving their RV and chugga, they're breaking down and they pull into the parking lot and they're like, we didn't plan on staying, but we gotta stay overnight. Okay, no problem. Permission for an overnight stay, you're gonna get Camping World up here to fix your RV. So it's not preying on the downtrodden or the, unfortunate. It's making sure that people don't turn town property into a free campground, which is happening. So that's what it is.
Comments?
You got 7 minutes.
I heard you.
Okay.
Any comments on that one? Okay, cool.
Skateboarding and noise.
All right, skateboards and scooters.
Skateboards and scooters. We get regular complaints about skateboarders on public ways. There's a group of enthusiastic skateboarders who like to skateboard down Switchback Road, if you can believe it. And they do it. And we get complaints every year. We get complaints on Green Hill Road. We caught people on Green Hill Road skateboarding and then one car's trailing and filming, which technically could be a crime of road racing, because road racing includes a vehicle for display or demonstration. But we didn't go that route. We didn't go that route. So, we had a complaint last year of a skateboard actually passing a vehicle on Black Mountain Road. Now, I will tell you, I don't know if that was indicative of how fast the skateboard was going or how slow the car was going, but I will tell you this. And skateboarders weren't just invented when I came to Jackson. In the entirety of my career, dealing with skateboard conflicts, trespassing aside, this is often associated with trespassing, the very first thing that skateboarders will say is I am entitled to the same rights and privileges as any vehicle. I'm going on the record saying I 100% agree. 100% agree. However, what makes it tenuous and dangerous and creates conflict is there's no regulations along with those rights and privileges. So this ordinance is an exact duplicate of the bicycle rules. So I thought, well, in order to allow the activity, because I mean, some towns do strictly prohibit it. I'm not advocating that. In order to allow it, but to ensure that it's safe both for the participants and motorists and pedestrians, I thought a model to use would be the bicycle rules that we already have codified in state statute. So that's exactly what that is. I supplemented skateboard and scooter for bicycle. So that's what that regulation is. There's one slight change because in the definition I had to add something about a handlebar and a grip, I think.
Right,
a scooter.
Yeah, so it could be, so it could not be, so that you couldn't put a little handle on a skateboard and say, well, it's a bicycle now. I can't see exactly what it is.
It's on the definitions on 2B, under
2B.
scooters.
Yeah, so, but like I said, this is an exact copy of the statutory section that regulates bicycles on roadways, to include that kids 16 and under should wear helmets, because I think that's pretty important for their safety and everyone else, rescue responders and stuff.
What about dry land cross-country ski equipment?
Say what now?
Dry land cross-country ski equipment.
Roller skating.
Rollerblading.
I haven't got any complaints, so it wasn't included.
Needs the definition, I think.
Well, hold on a second, skateboard. Person or persons may ride having more than 2 wheels and is not otherwise defined by statute. That are not otherwise defined by statute, so that would, it would be a tortured conclusion that a roller ski is a skateboard.
Yeah.
It may technically apply, I don't think we would stand muster in court. I think if you wanted to regulate cross-country skis, you'd have to add it.
Because the only thing I see as a safety issue is the, especially down Moody Road, when it's newly paved, I won't mention any names, but there are some people that do it quite regularly.
Sure.
And because of the steepness, they have to switch back, and they're crossing the yellow line.
There are a lot of the communities that have regulations included rollerblading.
Right.
I didn't, because we didn't get any complaints on it. And roller skates. I didn't want to add things that we didn't get complaints on. I want to strictly be complaints. So that's the premise of the ordinance, and the framework is laws that already exist.
We might have to wait for that last one then.
Yeah, that's fine.
We'll just have to set up.
Ready to adjourn, I guess.
No,
I'm sure they got questions.
Questions?
Yeah, we got some stuff.
Go ahead.
I'd like to speak on this
Sure.
in a non-rushed manner.
Sure.
So I'd be curious on two.
We'll bring it.
Before that, my name's Chris. I skateboard around here. You've seen me. Some of you have seen me.
I've seen you.
You've seen me. Skateboarding is great. It's a healthy activity. It's going to be an Olympic sport. It is an awesome thing. In my experience, I've had 0 negative encounters with law enforcement or citizens, aside from people throwing garbage at me, swerving purposely at me. That being said, yeah, some skateboarders do act in a way, just like any recreator is going to act in a way that's non-becoming of anybody in that sport or hobby or activity. I see a lot of redundancy in this proposed ordinance that's probably already covered under RSAs regarding recklessness, disorderly conduct, rules of the road. I also see a couple safety hazards, which would make actually operating a skateboard, if I had to do it word for word here, more dangerous. And I'd like to go into these and talk about them if there's time, but I don't want to rush through it.
Yeah, I don't think we have time today because we do have another meeting coming, but I would, obviously, we're gonna have another meeting next, was it the
February 4th meeting.
February 4th meeting? And we're gonna continue the budget and the ordinances as well as they're written, and hopefully make some corrections or adjustments, whatever we need to do.
Just a point of order question is, relatively new to Jackson, first meeting here, public hearing. Is it appropriate to make motions when you're a resident at a public hearing in Jackson on these situations?
I don't think we've ever had anybody make a motion from the floor.
Oh, it happens in Conway all the time. People
We're
are
not
pretty-
We usually, yeah, well, we usually make the motions and vote on, but you know, whatever you feel free to speak, I
Do
mean.
you guys abide by Robert's rules? Is
Yeah.
that- Okay. Right off the bat, I would make a motion to get that ordinance off, like, out of discussion and save the time.
This isn't the time.
Yeah.
This is a hearing.
Yeah, this is just a public hearing for the ordinances themselves. I mean, we're just having a discussion on them.
Sure. And then
They're
how
not
do we
being brought, they're gonna be brought to the town meeting at that point and voted on. That's how,
Oh, okay, so
All right.
you are.
we're not enforcing any of these now.
You have the opportunity to amend any of these at the town meeting.
No, you have the opportunity to amend them on February 4th.
Sorry, I can't feel what you're
That's
saying.
right, you can amend them on February 4th, our next meeting.
Okay.
All righty, and then they'll be finally presented in our warrant articles, and then the town votes on those warrant articles
But that's-
at the
Thanks for
town.
clarification.
Okay,
Yeah,
March.
it's a little different than I'm used to, so
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay, Sarah, quickly though, we gotta go.
Okay, quickly, but aren't our ordinances usually done in the privacy of the box, or are they going to?
They are not ballot votes.
These are not.
They are not ballot votes.
They're hand votes.
In fact, a lot of these don't even have to be town meeting votes. They can be done in a selectmen's meeting, but the choice was to bring them to the town.
Okay.
So you said we can continue talking about this.
Absolutely.
February 4th, but is that also the day that we have to make any amendments to these?
That will be our last chance to be able to make anything before the final writing of it.
I
right?
mean, usually, citizens don't amend, but
Sure.
you discuss it at
Yeah.
town meeting and say, I want to change this, or I don't like this, I want to remove it, I don't vote for it. But usually, I've never heard of a citizen.
Yeah, we determine what goes in the warrant, and then you guys vote on it. Okay, but we take your input
Yeah.
before we make a final writing. Following? Okay?
I make a motion that we head to whatever the next meeting is.
I'm not going to that meeting, but go ahead.
Okay, you get out of
I will second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all for coming, appreciate your input a lot, and it's all